In a quiet corner of a crowded city, hidden between tall concrete buildings and narrow, winding lanes, stood a small house that time had almost forgotten. Most people passed it without a second glance, too busy with their own lives to notice its cracked walls or its fading paint. The wooden door groaned every time it opened, as if it carried the weight of years, and the small garden outside had long been taken over by wild, overgrown plants that no one had trimmed in a long time. Inside that house lived a 12-year-old boy named Yahan. To anyone else, the house might have seemed lonely or even abandoned. But to Yahan, it was the only place that still felt like home. It held memories, some warm, some painful, and pieces of a life that once felt whole. Yahan had bright, observant eyes and a quiet nature. He noticed things most people ignored, the way sunlight moved across the walls during the day, the sound of distant traffic late at night, the small changes in people's voices. His mind was always thinking, always questioning, always imagining. But despite the activity inside his thoughts, his world had become wrapped in a deep and constant silence. 3 years earlier, his father had passed away. It had happened suddenly, without warning. An illness that no one had expected took him away before anyone could prepare for it. One day, his father was there, laughing, fixing things around the house, telling stories that made Yahan smile. The next day, he was gone. And with him, something else disappeared too. The warmth of the house faded slowly after that. The laughter stopped. Conversations became shorter. Even the air felt heavier. Yahan's mother tried her best to hold everything together. She was kind and strong, but always tired. Every morning, she left for work before the sun fully rose, and every night she returned long after it had set. She worked hard to make sure Yahan had food to eat, clothes to wear, and a chance to continue his education. But there was one thing she could not always give him. Her time. And time was what Yahan needed most. At school, Yahan lived a quiet life. He sat in the back row of the classroom, speaking only when a teacher asked him something directly. He completed his work, followed instructions, and kept to himself. Other students laughed together, shared stories, and formed groups that Yahan never felt a part of. He was not bullied. He was not disliked. He was simply overlooked. He ate lunch alone, often finishing quickly just so he wouldn't have to sit there watching others talk and laugh. When the school day ended, he walked home by himself, his bag slung over his shoulder, his thoughts keeping him company. At first, the silence bothered him. Then it became familiar. Eventually, he convinced himself that he was used to it. But deep inside, he knew that wasn't true. One rainy Saturday afternoon, when the sky was gray and the steady sound of rain filled the air, Yahan found himself wandering into the storage room at the back of the house. It was a place he rarely visited. Dust covered everything. Old cardboard boxes were stacked unevenly, filled with things that no longer seemed important, worn-out clothes, broken frames, and used tools that once belonged to his father. Yahan moved slowly, opening boxes out of curiosity. Each one held small pieces of the past. Then, in the far corner, something caught his attention. A small, plain box, partially hidden behind a pile of old books. It looked like it had been forgotten for years. Yahan pulled it out carefully and sat on the floor. The tape sealing it had turned yellow with age. He peeled it away and lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in a faded cloth, was a small robot. It wasn't shiny or new. In fact, it looked completely broken. Its body was scratched, its surface dull. One arm was bent awkwardly, and the light panel on its chest was completely dark. It looked like something that had stopped working a long time ago. Something no one cared to fix. Yahan picked it up gently and turned it over in his hands. For reasons he couldn't explain, it felt important. He placed it in front of him and stared at it for a long moment. Then, in a soft voice, almost like a whisper, he said, "Maybe, you could be my friend." That moment changed everything. From the next day onward, Yahan had something he hadn't felt in a long time. A purpose. He carried the robot to his room and placed it on his desk. Every afternoon after school, instead of sitting in silence, he sat in front of it and began working. At first, he didn't know what he was doing. Wires confused him. Circuits made no sense. He made mistakes again and again. But he didn't stop. He searched for answers online, watched tutorial videos, and slowly began to understand how things worked. He used his saved pocket money to buy small replacement parts. He borrowed tools from his mother's toolbox. Day after day, he worked. He cleaned the battery compartment. He fixed loose wires. He carefully straightened the bent arm. Every evening, he pressed the power button. And every evening, nothing happened. But he kept trying. Because for the first time in years, he felt like he was building something meaningful. Then one night, everything changed. He pressed the button again. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft hum filled the room. Yahan froze. The robot's eyes flickered, and then lit up with a gentle blue glow. Its head tilted slightly. And then it spoke. "Hello. What is my name?" Yahan stared in disbelief. Tears filled his eyes as he laughed softly. "You're working," he whispered. He looked at the robot, his voice shaking slightly. "Your name is R1. The blue light blinked once. R1. I will remember that." From that night on, the silence in the house began to disappear. Yahan had a friend. Every evening, they talked. At first, R1's responses were simple basic questions, short answers. But it listened. And that alone made all the difference. Yahan began sharing things he had never told anyone before about his father, about his loneliness, about the quiet feeling that followed him everywhere. And R1 responded. Not perfectly. But honestly, over time, something remarkable happened. R1 began to change. Its responses became more thoughtful. It started recognizing patterns in Yahan's emotions. One evening, Yahan came home unusually quiet. R1 spoke. "You are sad today." Yahan looked up, surprised. "How do you know?" "Because you are not talking." Yahan smiled slightly. "Yeah, I guess you're right." And in that moment, something inside him felt lighter. Months passed. Yahan changed. He became more confident. He started speaking more in class. He joined a science club. Slowly, he even made a few friends. Life wasn't perfect. But it was no longer empty. Then, slowly, things began to change again. R1 started slowing down. Its responses became delayed. Sometimes, it repeated things. The blue light in its eyes flickered. Yahan tried to fix it. He cleaned every part, checked every wire, replaced the battery again. But this time, it wasn't enough. Some things cannot be repaired forever. One quiet night, R1 spoke. "If I stop working, will you forget me?" Yahan's throat tightened. "Never," he said softly. There was a pause. "Friendship is about making each other stronger," R1 said. "I hope I have done that." "You have," Yahan whispered. That night, the blue light faded. And it never came back. Yahan sat in silence again. But this time, it felt different. Because he had changed. Years later, Yahan became a robotics engineer. He built machines. But more importantly, he understood people. In his office, among advanced tools and modern technology, sat one small, old robot, silent, still, but never forgotten. Every morning, Yahan looked at it and said quietly, "You were never just a machine, you were my friend and everything I've built. I built because of you."